Well, Dan, let's switch gears slightly to post close. As you know, in private equity, post ink drying, the first 100 days is a crucial idea, and accelerating performance in the first 100 days is a critical indicator. What are the key focus areas for a newly acquired company in its first 100 days? Any tactical advice on how to improve key performance indicators and what those would be?
Yeah, I've gelled my thinking on this topic or on this question really around what I call the five S's. Not to be cute or clever, but of course because every framework like this needs an acronym, right? And so the five S's are that define how to win the first 100 days in one person's humble opinion are number one, sense of urgency. And this is more of a mindset thing than a tactical or pragmatic thing, more of a mindset thing. Sense of urgency. You have maximum velocity on day one post closing. Day one is when these businesses are at their most change ready. And in private equity, speed wins. You're on a ticking clock in an IRR driven asset class, so speed wins. So the mindset here is just to be in a position to move quickly and decisively based on the learnings from diligence and based on the early alignment you've got with management, even pre-closing, on the value creation agenda, as we just talked about. So that's the first S. The second S is strong relationships. This is something that I know everybody's sort of nodding in agreement. Yeah, we get it. Relationship with the management team is important. What I see out there is a recognition that that's important, but not a lot of intentionality or defined practices around how do we accelerate the trust building process with management or between management and the sponsor? How do we accelerate the getting to know each other process, which is an important foundational part of building a strong relationship? So I have an approach that I coach leadership teams through in the first 100 days that's all aimed around how do we solidify and develop a strong relationship, which becomes the bedrock of the next three S's, the next of which is developing a shared understanding. Everybody's coming into the close or into the first 100 with a perspective on where is the business today. The private equity firm has developed that in due diligence. Management should have that by way of being involved in the business every day. So it's important that everybody get on the same page about the same objective, fact-based reality of where the business is today. And this is one of those do not pass go items. Don't talk about the value creation agenda. Don't talk about the vision until you have established strong footing around where is the business today. And you're both looking, when I say both, the board and the management team is both looking at the same high fidelity picture of where you are today. So that then brings us to the fourth S, which is same direction. Once you're clear on where you are today, the question is, how do we get aligned behind the same vision, strategy, and plan for the business, which we've already talked about. And then the fifth S, certainly last but not least, is a solid team. The faster you get the right who into the right where, focused on the right what, the right people into the right roles, focused on the right value creation initiatives, the faster value creation is going to happen, plain and simple. So, I don't know that the five S's are necessarily the totality of all the things you need to do in the first 100. There's post-closing checklists and there's, getting all the purchase accounting done and the like. But at a higher, more strategic level, I think those five S's put you on a pretty good path if you really focus on nailing those in the first 100.
So, Dan, let me try to put you on the spot. So, your framework is a sense of urgency. As you said, speed wins, strong relationships, develop a shared understanding, same direction, and solid team. So, if you get out your tactical toolbox, and let's say Dan is on site and you're at the organization, can you give me an example of, let's pick on one of your S's? How about develop a shared understanding? You open up your toolbox, you set it on the table. What are some of the things that you tactically try to make sure that you can use to move the needle forward within the entire organization, and that there is a shared understanding of what your value creation is? So how do you do that? Can you give me some tactical examples?
All five of these S's come down to having the right conversations with the right people, with the right facilitation at the right time in the first 100. So I'd say that as a meta idea. This isn't about creating work. This is about fostering the right conversations with the right people. And the shared understanding is no different. When I do this, part of the work I do is guiding leadership teams and their board through the first 100 days, almost as the Sherpa of helping them nail these five S's. And the work we do around shared understanding is quite literally getting management and the board into the same room, literally, and giving the private equity firm a chance to, at this point, the management team has already aired out their view of the current realities of the business in due diligence through management presentations, through data requests, et cetera. It's now the private equity firm's opportunity to come in and say, hey, based on our synthesis of all of the stuff we've talked about and learned about the business, here is our view of where the company is today. Present that to management in an objective, data-driven, fact-based way. Then the conversation becomes about where are we seeing the same picture and where are we seeing things differently? And there's not a playbook for reconciling the differences as much as just having the conversation and having somebody like me who can get in there and sort of foster and guide that conversation to a point where you may not agree on every nook and cranny, on every last part of how to interpret the facts and data in the business. But you understand where each other's coming from, and you have an ability or are in a position to reconcile any major discrepancies in terms of the picture that each group is looking at.
So Dan, let's flip the coin a bit. You shared a framework and some good tactics, but what are some common mistakes? What common mistakes should PE-backed companies avoid in the initial post-acquisition phase?
I can almost reframe that question to what are the mistakes I have made earlier in my private equity days, which I think are a good proxy for some of the mistakes I see out there. One is not taking the time to set clear expectations. And that's very generic, but some of the things I mean by that are clear expectations on here's why we bought the business, clear expectations on here's what we need to see for this deal to be successful, clear expectations on here's our view of the value creation strategy for this business, clear expectations on how are we going to work together, what does it look like to create a successful partnership between management and board. So I think that's a big part of the first 100 is just to set clear expectations in both directions. Here's what I, as the investor or board, expect of management, and conversely, here's what we as management expect of the board. And I think that has to be bilateral. That has to be a two-way conversation. So that's one mistake. Second mistake is slow to act, which we've beat this one up pretty good already, but slow to act in addressing leadership gaps, slow to act in addressing cultural issues. Clock's ticking in private equity, IRR-driven asset class. The slower you act and respond, the tougher it's going to be to hit your returns. So that's one. The third I see out there is viewing the first 100 days as sort of a Gantt chart or checklist exercise where the first 100 is spent on post-closing administrivia. Hey, we got to do the purchase accounting. We got to get the data room downloaded and organized. We have to get the post-closing legal all tuned up. And of course, you got to get the financial reporting stood up. Of course, these are important things boxes that need to get checked in the first 100. But in over-indexing there, you overlook the opportunity you really have in the first 100 to answer some of these more strategic questions. And in doing so, get the business off to a momentum-filled, clear, and aligned start. So I think that's the third one I see out there is just overemphasizing the administrivia